lately. I know, so I appreciate you spending the time with us, and let's just go on straight to questions we have for you.
Sure.
So you have recently been given the title of IGR Ambassador. So what's your plan with that? What do you want to do?
Well, first of all, I would like to say thank you for giving me the chance to be IGR ambassador. And I think, the first thing that really comes to my mind when I think about the role is just trying to get out there and do as much sort of community outreach as I can. I think that, one thing I really want to do is meet the people who are within the clubs. And for those who don't know, I've only been to one Bingham Cup, and I've met up with, the Ironsides and a few of the other flagship clubs of IGR, but I haven't really had a chance to actually meet a lot of the members and sort of build those relationships. So that's where my first focus is really getting to know the people in IGR and then starting to figure out, what are the ways we can improve IGR, get more people interested in IGR, and build on what we have going on here, because it's an amazing, it's an amazing organization, and I think that the Bingham Cup gives us a lot to build off of.
That's good. So and then so where I mean, how do you see that you could influence the growth of the LGBTQ plus rugby community?
The biggest thing I think about when it comes to that is I want to go into schools specifically, and I really want to kind of bring inclusive rugby clinics into schools along with doing speaking engagements. So what I've found out since coming out and going to speak at different schools and with rugby teams is a lot of kids just really haven't had an opportunity to just like ask questions candidly to an openly gay athlete. And I think a lot of that can be really beneficial and really show, the different opportunities there are for LGBTQ plus athletes out there. So that's really where I want to start, is by getting into different schools, bringing a coaching clinic in there, and maybe starting to open up the opportunity to join IGR to a younger generation. I think that we've gotten a lot of success with people who've picked up rugby very late with IGR and people who have decided to come over to IGR later in their careers. But I think it would be really cool to start trending towards, having youth rugby opportunities for people within IGR and being able to bridge the gap that way, and, connecting younger players with older LGBTQ mentors in rugby. I think that's a really great opportunity to grow IGR and, continuing providing opportunities for young queer athletes.
Having grown in Argentina and it's a rugby country, we have that option as kids. We played rugby a lot as kids. It's very available for us. But the US, it's only new. I mean, not only new, but it's a growing sport in here. It clearly is not something that you see very common, but there seems to be more and more interest nowadays for people for youth initiatives. So well, how you connecting with them? How you finding the youth initiatives for rugby?
I think the youth initiatives I've talked to about rugby are really excited to have people involved who can talk about this, because, I think there are so few openly gay professional men's athletes who are willing to speak about it, and even less of them in rugby. And I think that just being able to create those connections, they've been really happy to just have me involved and talk to the kids one-on-one. And I think that, I've been really pleasantly surprised with how engaged a lot of the kids are with just sort of hearing about it and asking questions. A lot of people are really interested on how to make schools and how to make team environments more inclusive and how to really like encourage queer athletes to get involved in rugby. So that's why I really think it would be great having those opportunities to go into schools where they have existing rugby programs even, and just saying, for queer rugby players specifically, there are these inclusive opportunities so that when you leave high school, or if you decide to leave after college, you're going to have all these incredible opportunities to, meet other players and create those connections further down the line in your career.
MLR has started a lot of really new groups for on that area, which is great, and you being involved with them. So I'm sure there will be opportunities there as well. So I'll take a moment to let people know that if they want to ask questions, the chat is open, and go ahead and place your questions on the chat. We have a few that I got through email prior to this conversation, so I'm going to start with those ones. So one that comes up is that how did coming up impacted your professional career, and is Devin Ibañez a name that we will continue to see in professional rugby events?
I would say that there's really been any impact on my professional career, I suppose. I mean, I haven't lost any opportunities, that's for sure. I don't feel like I've, playing wise gained any opportunities that I wouldn't have had otherwise. I think, the biggest impact really has just been a bigger demand on my time of things to focus on outside of training and rugby in general. So I think that's a very positive thing. I haven't had the concern of, losing opportunity, being released from contracts or anything, or losing playing time or anything like that, that I think a lot of closeted athletes really worry about. But I think that it has also really highlighted for me why so many athletes either wait until after their careers or wait until the off season of their careers to come out, because the increased time commitment of really trying to do that outreach and really trying to, have conversations like these where, you reach out to people directly and share your experiences can be really time consuming. And I think that that's still something you see with a lot of athletes, is they really shy away from taking that step because the idea of taking that on top of a, professional regime of training can be really daunting.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess it's already draining the amount of time you have to invest on your training. So just taking more time for all these other events could be a certain impact. Let me let more people that are waiting in the lobby. So there you go. Another question I have for you: your family was very supportive of you coming out young and staying in the closet while playing rugby. What would you suggest for a player whose parents are not supportive of their gay son or daughter?
I wouldn't say my parents necessarily were supportive of me staying in the closet for rugby, but they definitely let me go with things at my own pace. I think that they understood my reasoning of why I felt like, it was better to be a little bit more private in the rugby part of my life, and that was something I was more comfortable doing rather than being very open. But in regards to what I would suggest to somebody who's, in a situation where their family doesn't support them, I think that that's one of those things where I really think it's important to get out there and talk about these IGR teams that we have, right? Is if you're an athlete in these spaces and you're really struggling to find that support at home and maybe also within your club, knowing that there are IGR clubs out there and that there's this huge network of LGBTQ plus athletes who have experienced, similar things that you have, is such an important support system. So I would say, the same advice I would give anybody who's either in the closet or struggling to find that support around them is really take the time to seek out those relationships where you can build those one-on-one relationships that can be your support system, right? Because if you're not going to have that consistency at home with your family, IGR and the rugby community as a whole really can help fill that gap for you and really help provide you with that support. So that's really one of the reasons I think that it's so important that we get out there and let these kids know that, there are these athletes out there. There are athletes like you who are openly gay and playing sports who have been through what you've been through and will support you even if, other loved ones don't.
Cool. Butu has sent a question for you.
Awesome.
Why Richmond in the UK and not MLR? I imagine it has to do with your long-term goals. Can you tell us what they are vis-a-vis rugby in the UK?
That's a great question. So what happened with the whole with the whole Richmond versus the MLR situation was there was a lot of uncertainty over whether or not the season was going to be happening. And as somebody who's a temporary player, basically I was somebody who was on what's known as the associate player contract. So I'm not a full-time player, so I don't get the same benefits that a lot of full-time players would get. So with what they were having to do with the bubble was they were having people do basically a virtual bubble in the MLR where you had to agree to leave your job if you had a full-time job and only have your impact, or, only have your contact be within the team you're playing for. So I was in a situation where I couldn't leave my full-time job. So I made the decision to stick with my full-time job and pursue opportunities to play in the UK because I wanted to be closer to my partner anyways, and it seemed like a good opportunity to be able to play high-level rugby and be closer to my partner. So in terms of long-term goals, though, I really just want to keep playing rugby at a high level. Like, I'm happy to play professionally, but I'm also just happy to play a good level of high-level amateur rugby. I think that people think there's a bigger difference between, really high-level amateur rugby and professional rugby than there is. I think it's more of just something we kind of build up in our minds. So I really want to start looking towards playing in the UK a bit more long term so that I have that opportunity to, still play a good level of rugby, but also be closer to my partner because, for those who don't know, my partner lives in London. I live in Boston. the distance can be a little bit difficult, especially if I'm traveling around and playing rugby every weekend.
But isn't Fergus now going to be in the US for a while?
He's in the US for this year. Yeah. So
Sure.
who knows? Maybe this year, maybe I'll make a reappearance in the MLR. We'll see what happens. I'm going to be playing with Mystic River this fall, so my first priority right now is hopefully winning Division I national championship and then head into the MLR season. So.
Good. Well, that's good. At least we'll manage to keep you in the US for a while.
Yeah, I would say that you'll definitely be seeing me around that professional landscape for a long time, whether it's as a player or, like I said, doing that community outreach and kind of creating a bridge between the MLR and IGR, hopefully, and, the rest of the queer rugby community. You're definitely going to see me involved in more ways than one.
It would be great to have more activity with MLR. I did reach out. We have several teams that work with their local teams, San Diego, Seattle, some on the East Coast, LA. There was a lot of activity that was happening between the teams and their local clubs, but MLR has not gotten involved. So it would be great if we can get them more involved, because the activities that happen were great on both sides. So yes, absolutely. Just if you can find a way to make that bridge, we'll be very, very grateful.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of those long-term goals too, is, starting to find ways to approach the MLR and sort of figure out what are the ways that we can get these communities connected together, because, I think that rugby being for everybody is one of those underlying values of the sport. And if they're showing that commitment to domestic rugby and developing it, LGBTQ plus rugby players are part of that as well.
It's interesting because the Guiltinis that won the tournament this year, the Shield this year, she said, from LA, work very closely with the LA Rebellions, and they even assign one of the players as the contact player for us, that is actually planning to show up at practice and work with us in practice, which is awesome. But the good part of that is that many of the other players were like volunteering and asking that they wanted to collaborate with us. So it was very, very nice to see that from the player perspective, we were having that approach. So I'm sure, something I wanted to share with you, because that was nice to see.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that you do see a lot of that from the players. I think there's a lot of willingness to get involved. So it's really just about providing clear opportunities for ways that they can help.
Yeah. So which lead me to another question that's in there. Have you met other professional rugby players that are in the closet, and are they concerned coming out, and how will they affect their careers? I think partly you answered this at the beginning, but I don't know if you want to elaborate more on that.
I don't have anybody that I specifically know of who is in the MLR right now who is closeted and considering coming out. I think I'm sure that's somebody out there who exists. But yeah, I did already sort of touch on it. I don't think the hesitation is really any secret. I think that a lot of that hesitation has to do with how it's going to impact the opportunities you get, and if you'll be viewed as a distraction, or if it's going to be viewed as an attention grab. I'm hoping that me coming out will sort of quell some of those fears in a way, to see that I didn't have opportunities affected by that. But I think the big hesitation is still going to be around the public perception, and like I said, that additional time commitment, right? Like, you don't want anything that's going to detract from your rugby goals. You want to just be able to be yourself, but you also don't want to take on anything that is going to make it more difficult for you to do what you love, which is rugby. So
I have to say that this year I noticed that during Pride Month, there were so many companies that they changed their logo to the Pride version of their logo. So there was such a corporate embrace to the community, or at least, perhaps because it's the hot topic, and it was a beneficial approach from the corporate image point of view. But for someone who went through the whole process of having to fight for rights, to see what is happening now, that was really inspiring, because it really felt like, oh my God, now they want us now. And that was actually something that I see that it is welcoming players to come out, which is something that is refreshing to see. But having said that, have you experienced any bullying since coming out?
Bullying, I guess. I mean, I've definitely received like some various forms of like online harassment. I don't think that I've had to deal with any sort of like in-person, people bullying me because of my sexuality on the field or, making any comments or anything like that. I think I've just gotten a usual dose of online trolls here and there, but I will say that even that has been like a very, very, very small percentage of just like a huge outpouring of support and love. So I don't like to touch on the negativity too much. It does exist, but it really hasn't been a very big part of my experience since coming out. And I think if anything, I've had some just like really cool moments of like, for example, I played in a sevens tournament the other week, and during a match, I made a tackle, and I finished the tackle, and I land on top of the guy on the ground, and he looks up and he's like, "Oh shit, you're the gay rugby player," and we have like this little like interaction on the field, and it was all just like very wholesome, and just him just like being excited, just like, "Oh cool, like I've seen the stuff you've been doing," and so yeah, I think if anything, most of what I've gotten is just like connecting with more people and, people being happy that I spoke up in the way that I did. So yeah, I wouldn't say too much bullying per se.
You touch into something interesting. I mean, being in here in Hollywood and working here for many years, I met a lot of old stars that were always in the closet and they didn't talk about that. And when I asked them why, one of the common comments was like, "Because it was I want to be known for my work and not as a gay actor."
Yeah.
And here you had a scenario where the other player didn't look at you, "Oh, you're Devin Ibañez." They look at you, "Oh, you're the gay player."
Yeah.
And it is some reality you have to live with, I guess, right?
So it's really, and I'm actually really glad you brought that up, but that was something that was a big fear for me as well. Like you said, the actors who wanted to just be known for their work. I remember as long ago as when I was captain at UMass Amherst, so this was in, my 20s, 20, 21 years old. I had that concern in my mind. I didn't want to come out at the time because I didn't want to just be known as, the gay rugby player. I just wanted to be known as somebody who worked hard, was a good rugby player and a good leader. So having that fear of being known as, the gay one was something that, I always sort of felt, and always felt that pressure of feeling like if I am going to come out, I need to make sure that, I'm an undeniable and successful rugby player. And I think that really held me back and limited me in a lot of ways. So when I sort of made that decision to come out and I started realizing, what had been holding me back, I realized that was just another one of those outside factors, right? I'm taking into account other people's perception of me, worried that they're going to pigeonhole me as, the gay rugby player. And I was just sort of like, I've been living based on what those perceptions might be for so long and letting that rule my decision. I think I just got to the point where I said, there's going to be people who label you as that, and some of it might be a positive, some of it might be a negative, but you know who you are. You know that you're more than a rugby player. You know you're more than just a gay rugby player. So I just sort of decided to take that moniker on as just sort of a way to say, I don't really care. I think it's an honor to be known as that, if that's what some people are going to know me as. And for those who don't know me that and know me as like Devin, the more complex person than just a small title, I think that's great too. So I just hoped also that maybe if I kind of took that name and ran with it, that maybe that's one less concern somebody else has of like, oh, I don't have to be worried about being known as the gay rugby player because this person already took it and ran with it. So
We had another question for Butu. Is I think his experience has been that people state support for LGBT plus ruggers until they outplay them on the pitch, or that the IGR team beats the non-IGR team on the pitch, and that's a lot more subliminal and brings out the real stigma. Have you experienced that?
So I never played for an IGR team, actually. I was meant to play for an IGR team in the last Bingham in Amsterdam, but unfortunately I got an injury the week before. So in terms of outplaying them on the pitch, I guess I'm going to sort of figure that out. It doesn't surprise me. I think rugby players in general are very sore losers, and I think that we know that there's still an issue with the language used in the sport and the casual homophobia that's there. So I think it is definitely something to keep in mind. I think it's all happy to be supportive and this or that when you're going out there and beating a team by 50 every week. But if that same team turns around and beats you, it's probably going to be a bit of a tougher pill to swallow. And unfortunately, I think that some of that homophobia will come out. But I think that just shows the importance for getting out there and being successful, because it kind of brings it all to light and realizing, oh, well, this is still an issue we have. Even if they're all smiles when, we originally played against them and they would beat us every year, we'll see if the smiles are still there when, you're showing that you're a legitimate rugby player and you're a very legitimate competition.
It's all part of education as well, right? People are familiar to what's fed to them by the culture where they're brought up and all that. But who knows, the upbringing of each one of us is different. So what we confronted on our ideas of things.
And I will say that it also brings up something I literally just thought about too, which is I haven't had any negative experiences since I came out with my local amateur club. But then we played in a tournament on the weekend, and one of our players, almost gets into a fight, and after the game is, really pissed off, and then just starts going into this whole thing of like, oh, that so-and-so slur, right? Starts using the slur to describe something like that guy was doing this and that. And it's like literally all it took, right, is for them to just lose their cool for a second and they immediately revert back. So it's like they're very aware of that language when I'm around and, being sensitive and all that. But then the second that switch flips, they go right back into those old habits. So I think that, yeah, like you said, I think it's just a point of education to show that, that natural habit's still there.
I work in the sports industry and the sports broadcasters, and I've been in many meetings where the slur will come out referring to someone that pissed someone off.
Yeah.
And I'm actually find it interesting. So I'm going to look at them. Oh, okay. So it actually turns end up being into something funny at the end. But, it's actually part of people reactive expression more than meant with being to be mean. So we have 5 more minutes. I have one last question for you. This is very personal. Are you planning to have children? Will you introduce them to rugby? How do you think it will be for them in the rugby world with gay parents? You can't get any more personal than that.
Yeah, I think that kids are definitely in my future somewhere. I don't think I have a specific timeline on that. I'm still, for those who don't know, I'm only 28 years old. So I think one of the good things about being, a gay man is you don't have to worry too much about having those kids very early on. So, I think that that's definitely something I could see for myself in the future. In terms of if they get involved in rugby, I would love them to be around the sport and have opportunities to play. But it's not something I'm necessarily going to push on them. But I think it would be a really cool experience to grow up with, 2 parents who love rugby and are openly gay and proud. And, I wouldn't really care too much about if that child turned out to be gay or if they turned out to be a rugby player. I would just be happy to, be able to raise a kid in a rugby, kind of world and share my biggest passion. I saw that the Flamingos asked about what my involvement in IGR is going to be going forward. I'm going to still be filling that ambassador role. I'm hoping to, represent when I'm starting to go out into schools. That's a program I'm working on right now, is to get into schools and do coaching clinics there. So I'm hoping that some of my involvement will be just about spreading, the word about IGR, about the local clubs, about the opportunities that are out there. And then, as we also mentioned earlier, about hopefully bridging that gap with the MLR and trying to get them involved too.
Cool. So I think that's pretty much cover our time because we need to go to the next meeting.
Oh, good.
So before I let you go, any last words you want to share? Any thoughts for us that you want to share?
Just thank you to everybody for joining, and also anybody who ever wants to reach out about their club or any questions they have about me or would like me to come out to your club and either coach and talk to you guys. Like I said, really just happy to meet anybody involved in IGR, get involved in the clubs. And, you can find me on Instagram at thatgayrugger. You can also email me, thatgayrugger@gmail.com. I'm always there, happy to talk and just meet more, queer ruggers. So definitely reach out.
Watch out, you're going to get invited to all the local clubs.
Hey, I'm open to it. I want to meet people.
Right on. Okay. Well, again, Devin, thank you very much for what you're doing. I mean, I think that I speak for a lot of us. And definitely we will, as things are opening up and we'll have more opportunities to have you involved, we definitely will love to have you. As it gets cold over there and we can drag you into California, I'll be looking into ways to do that. So for sure.
Please do.
This was a very brief format. It's the first time we're doing this session, so it was rather quickly. Hopefully, this is something that will continue in the future, and we'll have more opportunities to chat with you and share projects that you're working on with LGR.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, and thank you for interviewing me. And absolutely, hopefully, more involved in the future as we keep going forward. So,
right.
I'll talk to you soon, and hopefully see you on the West Coast.
Thank you, Han. Thank you, everybody. Bye.